What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, man, what a day they are having. Outside of Mike Tomlin potentially naming Justin Fields quarterback one for the rest of the season. He also dropped that Russell Wilson is coming back to practice, and maybe that changes everything. Meanwhile, well, Davante Adams is on the market, and there's already members of the Pittsburgh Steelers that are trying to recruit him over here to the black and gold. We will dive into all that. Plus, it is the debut of a new weekly segment, Overreaction Tuesday, here at All Steelers Talk. Very excited to not just get Nick's overreactions, but also some of your overreaction questions as you tossed them in the chat. Nick, it's still a gloomy one here in the Berg, but it's not raining, which is a positive. And let me tell you, I feel like the sun will be shining if Davante Adams ends up in Pittsburgh. That's for sure. How you feeling, my friend?
We're all the way back. Star wide receiver rumors. The Ayuk stuff was exhausting towards the end. It didn't go the Steelers' way, but you know what? We're back. We're in the ball game. We've got a star receiver that seems to be on the outs with his organization, and the Steelers seem to be one of the teams that are certainly stepping up to be an interesting story over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it seems that everybody knows that the Pittsburgh Steelers need a wide receiver. The Steelers know that the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, and quite frankly, I think a guy who's playing wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers knows that the Pittsburgh Steelers need a wide receiver. We're talking about Cordero Patterson, who, let's run through the whole timeline here before we dive into everything that comes with the Davante Adams situation. It started yesterday, something like that. Antonio Pierce, head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, liked a tweet that said that Davante Adams may have just played his last game in a Raiders uniform. Then hours later, Davante Adams pops up on the K Adams show, says, yeah, he should be hearing from his head coach pretty soon. And then there's a report from, I'm going to botch this name, Vincent Bosignori, that says, quote, more to come on this. A league source with knowledge of the situation confirmed that the Raiders are growing open to the idea of trading Davante Adams. The source said the club has begun reaching out to teams to gauge interest in the veteran wide receiver. And then Cordero Patterson, doing the Lord's work here, decided to toss himself on Twitter and just say, sounds like he wants to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. So, Nick, I have a ton of thoughts on this situation, but I'll get yours first before we dive too heavily into mine. Davante Adams, is he coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers?
It's interesting because whenever the Brandon Ayuk stuff came to an end, I had kind of come to the conclusion on my own that, okay, the Steelers don't need a star receiver. They still need a receiver. They still need a number two, but they really don't need a star for this team. That's going to be George Pickens. They have plenty of options to be number threes and number fours. They just need a bona fide number two receiver. Yes. That could be a Treylon Burks. That could be a John Mechie. We went down the list over many, many weeks. Adam Thielen's name was thrown in there. And when this came up, I thought, okay, they still don't need a star receiver, but I started then thinking about what has happened over the past 4 weeks. You have been decimated with offensive line injuries. You have now been hit with running back injuries where 2 of your 3 running backs aren't healthy.
Yes.
So that to me says there's a little part that might believe that the Steelers might have to change course, not because they want to, but because they have to. You can't be a ground and pound team with an offensive line as injured as the Steelers and a running back room as injured as the Steelers. So because of that, maybe they have to change course. And if they're changing course, what better way to go from a more ground-centric game to a more air raid offense than bringing in a guy like Davante Adams to pair with George Pickens? And then who knows with Calvin Austin? Does he continue to go up? What happens with Roman Wilson? But you get the picture. I'm starting to think that this kind of aligns a little bit more with what the Steelers need to do, more so than I did before the season whenever they lost out on Ayuk.
Yeah. So what makes, just to add to that, just to add to what you've said, because you've hit every point, and and every point makes total sense at this point. Just to add to it, what better way to say Justin Fields is our guy and we're here to win a Super Bowl in 2024 with Justin Fields? Justin Fields has shown us that he could possibly take us to the promised land. Than to say, you want to know what we're going to do? We're going to give you a Davante Adams, a guy who could take you to the promised land, a guy who could be a superstar wide receiver next to one we already have, a guy who immediately makes your life 10 times better, who gets open, who adds to every aspect of this offense instantly and doesn't have to, quote unquote, get on a moving train or wait to get on that moving train. If Russell Wilson could jump on here in a day, well, I have a feeling Davante Adams could too, and the Pittsburgh Steelers wouldn't really hold back. Now, that being said, Arthur Smith's offense and what we have seen from it so far, if I'm Davante Adams, I'm pretty upset coming to Pittsburgh. But I don't think he's looking at that. I think he's looking at Justin Fields. I think he'd be looking at George Pickens. I think he'd be looking at Mike Tomlin. And I think he'd be looking at a 3-1 football team that looks much better than the team that he is currently on, and an opportunity to hunt for some playoff wins. So if I'm Davante Adams, I think that trade makes a lot of sense. On the Pittsburgh Steelers side of things, you don't have to worry about guaranteed money after the season. The Raiders have already paid him 4 weeks of his salary this year. It just makes too much sense. Now, you have to question, how real are these conversations? How real is this report that the Raiders are calling everybody? I have been told that there's a chance it's BS, and maybe it is, but you could tell that the tensions are growing. And we say this all the time. When there's smoke, typically there's fire, and the fire might be small, but it's growing, and it's growing by the week. And I'm telling you, Davante Adams, there's a chance he ends up in Pittsburgh. And you got to just think that Omar Khan's ready to make a move. He doesn't care. He's ready to make a move. Van Jefferson's done nothing. He's been invisible. Calvin Austin had one great game and showed last week that he probably could have had two, but they just didn't get him involved enough. This is a 2 wide receiver system, and yeah, well, you need a good number 2. That's Davante Adams. What is it going to cost? What are you getting Davante Adams? A pissed off Davante Adams on a terrible Raiders team that at this point just wants to clean house.
Yeah, I don't think him being pissed off helps you all too much, because there's going to be other suitors. I find it very hard to imagine that the Steelers are the only team that would be looking to bring in Davante Adams. So I think because of that, the price can be raised a little bit, especially because, I mean, the Raiders, they don't have to trade him. Yeah, sure, if he's upset, if he's pissed off, it might be better to trade him instead of leaving him in your organization, but they don't have to trade him, and I think there's going to be multiple suitors. So I don't know what the price is, but I don't think it's going to be anything. It's going to be something substantial. Let's put it that way.
Ooh, so what do you mean by substantial? What do you guess? Second round pick?
I'm saying it's a first or second day pick guaranteed. First would be if the price gets driven up, but I think it starts at a second day pick.
I think a first round pick's impossible. If we're going to just be honest, I think a first round pick. Antonio Brown went for a third, and there really hasn't been anybody. Like, there was that swarm of crazy wide receiver trades, and then everybody kind of realized that was ridiculous. We shouldn't be doing that anymore. And there really hasn't been one afterwards. And I just don't think anybody who's getting a guy as a rental would give up a first round pick, because unless you're the Chiefs, okay, the Chiefs should be giving up a first round pick for Davante Adams, but the Raiders are not going to trade Davante Adams to the Chiefs. Let's just be honest there. But that's the only team that I think. Just look at who needs a wide receiver who's in a running for the Super Bowl, who's willing to give up, because that's what he is he's a rental. So if you're trading for Davante Adams, you're Super Bowl or bust this season. And I just don't know any Super Bowl or bust teams that like really desperately need a wide receiver outside of the Steelers that would be willing to give up a first round pick. The Jets, but they don't desperately need a wide receiver. They desperately need an offense. They desperately need to figure out what goes right one week and what goes wrong the next week. But Allen Lazard looks fine. Garrett Wilson is an absolute stud, and Breece Hall catches some passes. But I agree. I think the Jets would make an offer. I just don't think they'd make a first round pick offer. I don't know anybody who really would. The Chiefs. The Chiefs, I'd say, I mean, what are we getting with the 32nd pick in the draft? Nothing. Who cares?
Yeah.
But the Raiders are not. The Raiders aren't going to take a trade for Davante Adams to somebody in their division. I could see a second round pick. I could see a 3rd round pick. Like, I could see it bubbling down to the Raiders are indecisive and a 3rd and maybe another 3rd next year, or a 3rd and something. If you're the Raiders, are you accepting I don't know, 2nd round pick? And what do the Raiders need? Everything, I guess. A 2nd round pick and maybe a guy like Van Jefferson in a trade, which isn't going to happen, but you just never know.
Yeah, I would highly doubt there's another receiver going back, just because the only receiver of value on the Steelers is untouchable, and his name is George Pickens. But
Yes.
I think going back 2nd or a 3rd makes a lot of sense. Again, we had this discussion with the Ayuk stuff. The Steelers don't have many players that they can throw into a trade. Obviously, everybody was talking Highsmith. I think we've seen the reasons that should be laughed at this point.
Yes. Yes.
But they really don't have anybody else. Do the Raiders really want a DeMonte KZ? Did they really want a Terrell Edmonds? Probably not, and certainly not in a trade like this. So again, it might have to be a 2nd pick. I just don't think there's another player on the Steelers that's really worth it for the Raiders or any other team that's trading with the Steelers, to be honest.
A 3rd round pick and a 2nd round pick and a 5th round pick. You taking that offer if you're Vegas?
If I'm Vegas, I'm not going to say if I'm Vegas. If I'm the Steelers, I'm certainly offering that and saying, if you want it, we'll be A-okay making that trade.
If you give up a 2nd round pick, this is probably the last question I have for this one. If you give up a 2nd round pick and you don't win the Super Bowl for a guy that's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, how upset are you? Is it a bust? Did you make a mistake?
Well, again, that is dependent upon how far you get. I mean, if you don't win is it Super Bowl or bust if you're trading for Davante Adams? It seems like it, but at the same time, if you get to the conference championship and you lose by a point to Mahomes and the Chiefs, are you really going to say, well, that was a wasted year? No, you're going to say, all right, well, we figured some things out. We found some answers and we can build off of this for next year. It sucks that you paid a premium for it, but it depends on how everything turns out. It's not just a clear Super Bowl or bust in my eyes.
Okay. That makes sense. I like that answer. I think that you better a point seems like a good spot there. You better get that close to winning the, because you just gave up the future. You got to go do it again. You got to figure out your wide receiver position another year from now. And now you don't have a 2nd round pick to go and get one. And you have other needs on this team. So definitely something to watch. Davante Adams in Pittsburgh just makes a lot of sense in my eyes. He's been a name that we've talked about a lot. Once we realized there was no guaranteed money after the season, it just made way too much sense. And I told you, I mean, we talked about this so many times. This is when teams are going to suck. People are going to get mad. And here it comes. All right. Next thing I want to talk about, Justin Fields, Mike Tomlin, and a change in pace to a plan that we'll listen to it. But Mike Tomlin tried to tell us all that nothing has changed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, that his way of thinking has not changed, but also Russ is coming back and maybe Justin Fields is the long-term quarterback. We don't know. A lot and a little all at once. We'll start with Mike Tomlin's words on Russell Wilson returning and what the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback room will look like in Week 5 against the Cowboys.
Just met with our training staff and Russ and plotted out a course for his work today. He'll have another strong work day today. We'll see how he feels in the morning, and we'll let that be our guide in terms of his participation. But it seems like he's in a place where his participation is going to pick up some in terms of a practice setting, a live pocket, if you will. We won't draw too many conclusions, but we'll just start that process. And we'll comb through that day by day, evaluate his ability to move and function and protect himself, and obviously evaluate his level of productivity. And we'll let that be our guide in terms of whether we get into serious consideration as we push forward toward game time this week. So in a lot of ways, I'm taking the same posture that I've taken in recent weeks, but I'm acknowledging that he's doing more work today than he did last Tuesday. It's probably going to produce the potential of more work tomorrow, and then we'll have some conversations as we proceed through the week based on the result of those things.
Later, he was asked, quote, is there anything else Justin Fields can do while Russell Wilson is injured to secure the QB1 spot? And if there's potential that even when Russ is healthy, Fields is the guy. And Tomlin said, quote, there's potential for that, but we're not there where we stand today. Russell Wilson's coming back. Mike Tomlin's opening statement, I think, is what really laid the groundwork for this one, because all he did was praise about how Justin Fields didn't blink, cut his eyelids right off. There was no tension. There was no pressure. There was no nothing. This was cool, calm, collected Justin Fields in a game that was anything but cool, calm, and collected. And when things got bad and skies got dark and the Steelers were backed into a wall, Justin Fields was playing, and he came out here to win, and he tried and did everything he could to get the Pittsburgh Steelers as close as they possibly could to win that football game. It sounds like Russ is going to make his way back. It sounds like Russ is going to be healthy. And to be honest with you, it sounds like we are very, very close. I'm not going to say it's this week. I don't think it's this week. And I could be wrong. This could be another freezing cold takes, whatever. This is not going to be the week the Pittsburgh Steelers name Russell Wilson QB2 behind Justin Fields, but it's going to happen on Tuesday. It's going to happen 1 week today. Mike Tomlin will walk into that press conference and say Justin Fields is the guy for two reasons. One, he's not going to do it in a non-dramatic fashion. Tomlin's not about drama, but there's a time and a place for this stuff. This is the time and the place for it, is the Tuesday press conference. It's not a Friday afternoon so that worlds can swirl and the market can go crazy and everybody can freak out for 2 days. And then on Sunday, if Justin throws 3 interceptions and stinks, you've now just made a critical mistake. He's not going to do that. What he's going to do is see where Russ is. And no matter what Russ's participation really is, it will set himself up for a questionable and then a whatever. Or it's going to be a point where on Friday, Tomlin addresses the media and says, Russ is healthy, and we are not naming Justin quarterback 1, but Russ still needs to get his feet wet a little bit more. We got to give him a little bit more time before we feel comfortable putting him out there and risking further injury. I expect Tuesday to be when they make that announcement, but we're damn close. Do you feel the same, or you feel it's happening this week? This is now Justin Fields' job.
Well,
do you feel this is Russell Wilson's job?
Well, I don't feel this is Russell Wilson's job. I still think that Justin Fields has done enough to be in the position where he has to lose it, and he certainly hasn't over the first 4 weeks. Now, when it comes to whether or not that's going to be the case in this coming week, if everything that you tried to forecast there comes true, I certainly think it's moving to a point where there needs to be a resolution. It's moving to a point where there's going to be a resolution, because Mike Tomlin led his press conference off with that. He said, first and foremost, all love for Justin Fields. He doesn't want to dunk on Justin Fields because Fields carried that team back into contention on Sunday. But secondly, he tried as hard as he could to say, please don't ask me questions about this, but things are changing. Russ is getting healthier. I'd prefer if you don't ask, because I don't want to give you the answer in my head. So I think there is going to be a resolution, because now that they've opened that door of, we can't continue to just give you the same answer week in and week out, there's going to have to be something and an answer from Tomlin on who is actually the Steelers quarterback 1 when all healthy coming up here in the next couple of weeks. It kind of mirrors the Roman Wilson situation, where Russ might be healthy and designated as healthy, but they're not comfortable putting him out there. And I think that's what you might see in week 5 against Dallas.
Yes, I agree. Tomlin will have to address this on Friday. You could request Tomlin, and that's what we'll do. We'll request him on Friday, and we'll ask him the quarterback situation, and he will tell us it's going to be Justin. But it's only because Russ is just not there yet, and we have to ramp him back up, and we'll make a decision later in that time frame. But it's not going to be an immediate thing. And I'll tell you, Justin should be the guy. For every reason that Mike Tomlin gave, Justin should be that guy. He's a dude who looked cool, calm, collected. He's a guy that did not fall when he should have fallen. He's a guy that carried this team, that put him on the back, that showed that he can win football games when you put the ball in his hand and you need him to go win a football game. Did he pull it off? No, but is it his fault that Minkah Fitzpatrick got called for a bad flag? Nick Herbig got beat on a crucial 3rd down. He had 0 running game. Zach Frazier snapped the football into his face mask when nobody was ready for it. Honestly, no, I don't think so. So Justin Fields, in my eyes, is a guy that's going out. We got some breaking news here. Don't know what this breaking news is.
Yeah, according to Ian Rappaport a few minutes ago, Raiders star wide receiver informed the team that he preferred to be traded per him and Mike Garafolo. Nothing is imminent, but the situation is on watch for sure. So an official trade request from Davante Adams.
That's big news for the Pittsburgh Steelers and everybody else involved here. Like we said, things are heating up fast, my friend. heating up and heating up fast. Davante Adams. Do we make a bold prediction that Davante Adams becomes a Pittsburgh Steeler sooner rather than later? Let me ask this one. Better question here.
Okay.
Better question. How long do you? This is not going to be Brandon Ayuk. We're not going 3 months of nonsense here. We only got 4
personally,
weeks.
because there's a I was about to say there's a trade deadline.
By the end of this week or by the end of next week, do you think a trade goes down?
For Davante Adams, yes. To the Steelers, that's a harder question. I think he is gone by the end of next week. He's not in Vegas, but whether or not he's with the Steelers or one of the other 30 NFL franchises, that much I obviously don't know.
Yeah, as we all know, it'll happen about 10 seconds after we get off this podcast.
Yep.
Whether it's to Pittsburgh or not, who knows? But that's massive news for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the rest of the NFL world. And, well, we're here, boys. We are here, boys and girls. The NFL is real, and the trade deadline is coming fast. All right. We talked Justin Fields. We talked Davante Adams. It's time for a new segment, a very exciting segment, if we're going to be honest. Me and Nick have been talking about this for a little while, and we're pretty pumped to break it out. The first annual, one of many weekly Overreaction Tuesdays here. We asked you guys to give us your overreactions, or at least your question overreactions for me to respond to. Nick came up with some of his own. I know we got a couple. I have not seen any of them, and I'm very excited for live reactions here to these. We'll kick them off. Nick, let's toss it to you. Overreaction Tuesday starts now.
Yeah, let's start with my couple of overreactions before we get to the ones that the listeners graciously put into our community page. And the first one I have is on the defensive side of the football. The leader in tackles through 4 weeks, safety Deshaun Elliott. So here's the overreaction, or I'll let you be the judge. Deshaun Elliott has been way better than Minkah Fitzpatrick through the first 4 weeks of the season.
Ooh, oh man, way better than Minkah Fitzpatrick through the first 4 weeks of the season. I'll put the cap on overreaction there. I'll say overreaction only because you've said way better. If you said better, it makes sense. Deshaun Elliott has been, in my opinion, outside of TJ Watt, the second best player on the Pittsburgh Steelers overall. We're talking every single player there is. Deshaun Elliott has been number 2. Way better than Minkah Fitzpatrick. Minka's coming up with plays, and he's doing things, and he's being Minkah, even if he's not making the crazy plays. But I think part of that is that teams are just looking at Deshaun Elliott saying, well, he's not Minkah Fitzpatrick, so that's better and gives him better opportunities. I also think Deshaun Elliott gets to play a little bit more in the box, a little bit more up front. Minkah doesn't get to do that as much. So I'm going to cap it on, I'm going to say overreaction on this one. First ever one is an overreaction. I like that start only because you said way better than Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Well, let's move over to the second one, and let's stick in the Steelers secondary, because Sunday was Joey Porter Jr.'s worst game of his young career. You add on the fact that he dropped an interception in the end zone. I think it spells trouble for this Sunday against CeeDee Lamb. So Sunday last week and Sunday this week will be a combination of the worst 2 weeks of Joey Porter's career.
Oh, that's a tough one. What can we? I'm pulling them up now. What's CeeDee Lamb's season thus far? 98 yards, 67 yards, 90 yards, 61 yards. That's not a guy that has a lot going on. Worst 2 games of Joey Porter's career. I'll say overreaction for this reason. Mike Tomlin does not lose the second game when he's supposed to lose the second game. And Mike Tomlin is supposed to lose the second game this weekend. The Steelers defense is supposed to lose the second game this weekend. This is not the New England Patriots and then the Arizona Cardinals. This is the Indianapolis Colts trap game followed by the Dallas Cowboys, who, well, quite frankly, should beat the Steelers right now because they're coming off a win. The Steelers are coming off a loss. That's just how the NFL world works and how they will say it. And I just don't think that's going to happen. The Steelers are much better on primetime than they are during the day. And CeeDee Lamb is good, but I don't think Joey Porter Jr. lets that happen. I think that's more Mike Tomlin's and Terrell Austin's poor defensive scheme against Indianapolis than it was Joey Porter Jr. being that bad. And I want to say that's an overreaction. Could be wrong. If I'm going to be wrong on any of them, that might be the one I'm wrong on, but I'm going to say overreaction.
All right, I got one more for you before we go to the handful that we got from the listeners. This one on the offensive backfield. Najee Harris's performance on Sunday against the Colts proves that he cannot be a 3-down running back in the National Football League.
Oh, that's not an overreaction. That is not, and that's a good one. That is not an overreaction. Najee Harris is not a 3-down running back in the National Football League, at least not in Pittsburgh, and certainly not in Arthur Smith's offense. I mean, that was the big thing coming into the season, was why did the Steelers not pick up Najee Harris's fifth-year option? Why are they waiting to sign him? Because they wanted to see what he can do in Arthur Smith's offense. Arthur Smith's offense is not designed for a guy like Najee Harris, and you see it when Cordero Patterson is on the field. You see it when Jaylen Warren is on the field. I mean, even if it's very limited right now, you could tell Najee Harris can't do the wide zones. He can't get outside. He doesn't have the burst for it. I think on some teams it makes sense, but even around the league, you look at it, you know, those power slow guys that everybody wants to amp up. They don't got it right now. Even Ezekiel Elliott was a name week one. Everybody was, this guy's going to be a stud. He's back to rebirth. This is what he's here for. Fell right off. Why? Because you need some speed in the NFL these days, and Najee Harris doesn't have it. I'm not saying Najee Harris is bad. I'm just saying Najee Harris should not be touching the football 20 times a game when the offense is designed for the running backs to get more than maybe 3 yards a carry. So that one's not an overreaction. Najee Harris is not a 3-down running back in the NFL. Not right now.
Those are the 3 that I had. Let's jump into the listener overreactions, and let's start with Matt Maxey, who wrote in and said, the defense looked like they closed down the bars in Indy on Saturday night. I've played football with a hangover. It sucked for the first half, just like the Steelers defense.
Oof. I would say the Steelers sucking is not an overreaction. They were terrible. That was the worst defense in the NFL that week, I would say. Pretty close. Maybe outside of even Miami's looked good in the worst game we could possibly watch of the week. Mason Rudolph. Shout out Mason Rudolph. Miami's defense didn't look nearly as bad as the Pittsburgh Steelers did in this one. But I'll give you a sign for hope that maybe, you know, for one, they didn't shut down the bars. TJ Watt would kill somebody if they were in the bars. But a sign for hope of why I think the Steelers defense sucked this past week, but it might be an overreaction to think that they're going to suck moving forward. And that's just simply because Joe Flacco is the guy that comes in here and does this. He's the veteran quarterback that sparks you, and you prepare all week for a totally different guy, and you just don't have it. And when you try to adjust, you make the wrong adjustments. And sometimes that comes back to bite you in the butt. Sometimes that's how teams like the Colts, guys like Joe Flacco, do what Joe Flacco and the Colts did. So I would say overreaction that they were terrible this week, not an overreaction, or not an overreaction that they were terrible this week, an overreaction that they will suck overall.
Let's go over to Wall Destroy, who wrote in and said, Tomlin is good, not great. His seasons are similar to that of Marvin Lewis when he was with the Bengals.
Oh.
He will not lead the Steelers to a Super Bowl win again.
Oh, this is as tight. This is as close to walking that line as you could possibly go. I'm going to say that's an overreaction. And I'm going to say that's an overreaction because the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to win every Super Bowl for the rest of the time, no matter how good they might look and how real that possibility might be, at least this season. There are NFC teams, but the NFC is much easier than the AFC, and I just think that the AFC always has an advantage here. And I truly believe Justin Fields can be good. And if you could get a quarterback, you could do big things. Now, you got to fix the rest of it. And I think the Steelers dug themselves a hole, but I think they're digging themselves out of it with picks like Najee Harris and Kenny Pickett and just the bad ending to Kevin Colbert. And this is that Kevin Colbert's a Hall of Famer. Dude's a legend. But the end of Kevin Colbert was not great. The beginning of Omar Khan is great. And you're hoping that that trend continues. And if it does, I have a feeling that the Steelers, they find their way to the big game. Now, in Mike Tomlin's presence, I'm going to say it's an overreaction because chances are they do win a Super Bowl more than he never does win another Super Bowl. But I will admit that's as close to walking the line as you could possibly get.
We got another Tomlin one here from Samuel S., who I did see in the comment section on our live right now, so he's going to hear this one. Said, quote, need a coaching change. Bring in Belichick in a role that Flores had. Maybe we can convince Antonio Brown to be a wide receiver assistant and Le'Veon Bell to be a running back assistant coach. It would be the most epic Super Bowl run ever.
I mean, not an overreaction that it would be the most epic Super Bowl run ever. You hit the nail right on the head with that one. An overreaction to think Antonio Brown could be able to coach some guys, because he won't. I mean, people have heard Antonio Brown speak. It's like, everybody tries to use the term or the comparison. Steph Curry can't teach you how to shoot a three, because he'd just look at you and be like, why aren't you doing this correctly?
Just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, just shoot the three. Antonio Brown would somewhat be the same way, and him running a football team, it didn't go the greatest with the first time, so I have a hard time thinking he's going to do well the second time. Le'Veon Bell, I like that one to be, of all three of them, I think that one makes the most sense to come in here and just have some role. I think that would be cool, and I think Le'Veon Bell is very good and an incredibly hard worker, and just somewhat revolutionize the game, and I think that could help a lot in guys like Jaylen Warren and these younger guys. Bill Belichick, he's going to end up in Jacksonville by the bye week, so that one might be gone. I will say it's not an overreaction that would be the most legendary Super Bowl run of all time. It is an overreaction to think the Pittsburgh Steelers got a shot at any of these guys or would bring any of them back in that coaching tree.
Let's go over to Mupp Hears, who said, take the green dot away from Patrick Queen and he's going to play with more instinct. Hence, we will see a better performance week in and week out instead of whatever product he's putting on the field right now.
I think that's an overreaction. You got to call the plays, but that's all you're doing. If the inside linebackers aren't there, it's not the it is the quarterback position, but it's not the quarterback position, because you have to call the play, but then you just go and do your thing. This is a very smart defense. Minkah Fitzpatrick's the guy that'll move guys around if you need to be moved around. Cam Hayward and TJ Watt will move guys around, but calling a defense is much different than calling an offense and being an actual quarterback. I don't think that hurts him. I truly just think that his eyes are not where they need to be right now, and his reaction time is a little bit slow, and he's got to pick all those things up. I think it's an overreaction to think you're going to get a better product if you take the green dot away. It's not an overreaction to think he needs to be better, but I don't know if that's how you get it done. I think he just simply needs to be better.
Let's close it out with this one. Vibing with the Dogs, an oldie but a goodie, says, quote, TJ Watt, in all caps, is not that guy, and he had us all fooled that he was going to have a breakout season this season.
You want to end it with the overreaction of overreactions.
Great.
That's where it starts. That is a banger, my friend, but it is as big of an overreaction as they possibly come. That TJ Watt is the guy. He has been the guy. He showed week 1. He remains the guy. He did it again in week 2. And just because he had one bad week, which granted he had one bad week. I mean, you go back and I saw a compilation the other day. I was laying in bed watching it, and it was TJ Watt getting held by Colts players to like romantic music in the background while the refs just stood there and watched. That's a good one. But TJ Watt is the guy. I think, in my opinion, he still remains the best player, the best defensive player in the NFL. And to be honest, if him not getting a half sack last week was crazy, and it would be crazier if the entire team didn't stink. And I just think maybe he caught something that was on that plane that day, and that's what it comes down to. But no, that's an overreaction. That's a banger, my friend. That is as good of an overreaction as they come.
And that is a wrap for the first edition of Overreaction Tuesday with All Steelers Talk.
Awesome. That was awesome, guys. Make sure that you send them next week. That was a blast. We're doing them every Tuesday, Overreaction Tuesday. With that said, we're going to start answering all your guys' questions, so make sure you toss them in the chat. But first, we got a word from our boys over at DraftKings. There's a crisp in the air. The leaves, they are falling. And my friends, football is on every single weekend. That is what fall is all about. And you can make your weekends even more exciting with our partners, DraftKings. Right now, any new customer who signs up and bets $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets by using our promo code ALLSteelers. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code ALLSteelers. The crown is yours. That's $200 in bonus bets instantly. Then stay in on the action and use that $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns with DraftKings. DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings daily fantasy football and have a shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use my promo code ALLSTEELERS and bet just $5 on any wager and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code ALLSTEELERS only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Shout out our boys over at DraftKings. While we were doing that, the Pittsburgh Steelers made a couple of roster moves, placing James Daniels on IR. Hope nothing but the best for the guy. Hate to see guys go down with injury, especially on contract years. Added Max Sharping, former starter for the Cincinnati Bengals, and a guy that hopefully boosts this offensive line. Tried to do some digging on where we see that offensive line sitting this week, and couldn't really get anything because I think it's a little bit too early in the week to know what's going on with Isaac Seumalo. So we will follow that throughout the week. That being said, let's answer all your questions. If you got them, toss them in the chat. We'll get to them before we head out of here. Let's kick it off. What do we got?
Yeah, let's go to the first question here. That is, what is your favorite restaurant to get authentic Mexican food in Pittsburgh?
Oh, that's a good one. Perron in East Liberty is my go-to just because it's close. But there's a lot of them. And it's funny because every time my family comes down here, they just want to go to Mad Mex, which is good, but definitely not authentic Mexican food. So especially when the thing I order is wings. So, which they have phenomenal wings. But Perron's a good one. There's a bunch of taco joints. You got to go to the taco joints. And then El Burrito, excuse me, to just get a little burrito on the run. Always fire.
Yeah, they're not authentic, but Condado, Bakersfield, they always hit.
Yeah, Condado, you got to go to Condado downtown, though. The Condado in East Liberty stinks. It's different. It's a different Condado.
Let's go over to Marlon Lewis, who says, don't we need to see something from Roman Wilson before trading assets for another receiver?
No, I mean, I would like to see Roman Wilson, but sometimes it just doesn't add up that way. And if the question is, if the options are trading for Davante Adams or waiting to see what you have in the third round rookie, I'm going with Davante Adams. 10 times out of 10 times, actually. I would like to see Roman. I would have liked to see Roman before today. But if Davante Adams is available and the Pittsburgh Steelers could get a deal done, you go get a deal done. I don't think there's any question there. And then you still work Roman Wilson in there, but you definitely go get Davante.
Let's go over to William, who says, why do I have a feeling that even with our O-line and running back rooms completely banged up, that Mike Tomlin is going to continue to run Najee straight up the middle every time for 1 to 2 yards?
See, that's the problem is, and I get you, but that's the confusion here is Arthur Smith's offense is not built to do that. And they're not doing it with Najee. He's running between guard and tackle and then outside the tackle. And it doesn't make that's not what he does. If you could run him between Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick's butt cheeks and say, get 3 yards, he'll get 3 yards. What he can't do is take it outside the tackle or take it between the guard and the tackle and say, let me get 4 yards here. He just can't. That's not his game, but that's what Arthur Smith wants to do constantly. And that's what Arthur Smith's offense is, but he's not adjusting it to Najee Harris. It works with Cordell Patterson. It's not working with Najee Harris. I think they should be doing more of that where they run him straight up the middle and say, get 3 yards. It'll work out. And I think, 3 yards, 3 yards, 3 yards. You're looking at 4th and 1, go for it. And I think that's where they should be, but that's not what they're doing.
Let's go over to Grayson, who says, do you guys think that the Steelers O-line really has a chance to overcome these injuries and actually start helping create plays again?
Oh, it's tough. It's tough. When you get Isaac Seumalo back, that's when you could decide that. But right now, they're just too banged up to have any faith in them. And that stinks because you shouldn't have faith in your backups. You should to a little degree. When there's 3 of them in the lineup, it's a different situation. So I think that depends on Isaac Seumalo and his faith or in his health. If he could come back and be a contributor, be ready to go and good to go and add to this team, I think that's the best place to be for the Steelers and it boosts things. If he can't and the Steelers have to start a bunch of backups still, they're in trouble.
Let's go over to Vintage, who says, if we get Davante Adams, who becomes the wide receiver 1? GP has been proven himself as of late.
I mean, George Pickens is still technically the wide receiver one, but you'll just have two wide receiver ones, and they do two different things. Davante Adams could do a lot of underneath work and be that volume catch guy. He's done it before in the past, and George Pickens could still be George Pickens. So I think it's just more so of a 1A, 1B situation, which is really good to have because a lot of really good teams have that. I don't think it takes away from George.
I want to skip down to this one because we missed it yesterday and both of us discussed it before coming on. Steven wants to know, coming down for the Giants game with my dad, we want Italian. What is your favorite Italian restaurant recommendation in Pittsburgh?
Man, dude, I am going to break some really bad news for you here. Really bad news. Pittsburgh has terrible Italian food. Terrible. You could go to the burbs. You could go to the burbs of Pittsburgh and find some great Italian food. But you can't go to Pittsburgh and you're either going to spend $300 on a meal or you're going to get bad Italian food. So go to Pino's. Pino's isn't bad. Altavia's isn't terrible, but there's not good Italian food in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, brother.
Let's go over to Christopher, who says, the thought among Yinzers about Patrick Queen is that he has been subpar at best. If he catches the 2 interceptions that he dropped, would our opinion of him be any different?
Probably. I think I believe you're looking at it in two. You have to look at it in two different lights. The Steelers need a guy who could tackle and make those plays, and that's what Patrick Queen is struggling with. But they also brought him in here to be the fast, reliable coverage guy that he could be as well. And that's what he's having good plays there. I think it would change things. It would take the pressure off. But I still think when you broke down his film, you would find some issues that need to be addressed. I think it's a two-sided coin here. And you just have to evaluate the whole game and say that the whole game has some holes in it. And that the holes are not in the coverage right now. They're more so in his direction, his tackles, his vision for where the ball is going to be.
Let's go over to James Reese, who says, we play the Raiders in 2 weeks. How likely will that play into the Raiders possibly trading Adams to us?
I don't think it does. I would believe the playoff push, if the Raiders believe they're a playoff team, the AFC plays more into it than anything else. The Raiders don't want to trade Davante Adams to a team that is going to make life miserable for them come the playoff push. That's where things change, which could hurt the Steelers, but it depends on who in the NFC is going to look for him, and I don't know if anybody is going to. I could be totally wrong there. The Packers, which is crazy to say, just lost Christian Watson, so maybe that's a name to watch, but I would believe the AFC and just the fact that they would compete for a playoff spot makes things more difficult than the fact that they play them in 2 weeks.
Let's go over to William's question, who said, whatever happened to our tight ends, thought that was the Steelers' highlight this year with Arthur Smith and his offense.
I mean, Pat Freiermuth is the second leading receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's holding up. It's holding the value. It's just, maybe not as flashy as everybody wants it to be, but Pat Freiermuth is currently the second leading receiver. And Darnell Washington, for what Darnell Washington is as a human being, is doing things. I mean, he caught the first touchdown of the season. He hurdled a dude last week, which is unheard of for a guy who's 300 plus pounds. So I would say that they're getting involved, maybe not as much as they wanted them to early, but I don't think anybody's getting involved as much as the offense wanted them to early.
Let's go down to who says, do you think the Steelers can give up more than 24 points and still beat the Cowboys on Sunday night?
No, the expectation should never be a team giving up 24 points and winning. It's just should never be that. I get that it happens all the time, but you should never expect to win once you give up 24 points. That's just rule of thumb in the NFL. Do I think it's possible? Yeah, I think the Steelers could go out there and score 30 against the Cowboys, especially with their two best defenders missing. It's definitely a possibility, but I wouldn't say that I'd be confident in it because I would never be confident in winning a game that you have to score 25 plus points.
Let's go over to Sean LaRock, who says, I think the way this football season's going, that the Steelers and Omar could pull off a D-Hop and Davante trade. What are your thoughts?
Oh, that's a lot of names, and that is a lot of compensation. That's a
lot of personalities.
Yeah, like it might be too much. It might be too much. I could see one or the other. I could see maybe they have a shot at both of them. I don't think they'd make trades for both of them. I also don't think you need both of them. You just need one. I would guess Davante Adams is the better one, but DeAndre Hopkins isn't even playing for the Titans right now, so maybe that's a possibility. I don't know his health, but I think both of them might be just a little bit too much. Just a little bit too much.
Let's go to OS, who says Justin Fields or undefeated Vikings quarterback Sam Darnold.
Oh, okay. Can I go Justin Fields, and can I explain why without sounding like a homer? I'm cautious of Sam Darnold because Sam Darnold has done this before. You know, Sam Darnold was an MVP candidate. What was it? 2 seasons ago, and the Carolina Panthers were going to win the Super Bowl. They didn't. He wasn't. He didn't last much longer than those 3 games. In New York, his last season in New York, or maybe it was his second last season in New York. First 3 games, he looked dominant. He was that dude. They were hit. They got him. Fell off. So I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of Sam Darnold still, and because of that, I'm taking Justin Fields because Justin Fields looked like a dude who fell and got back up, and that's what I wanted to see. So I'm going to go Justin Fields in this one. I could be wrong, but I'm still skeptical about Sam Darnold.
This might be a hot take. I think Justin Fields would be successful in Minnesota and in Pittsburgh. I think Sam Darnold would only be successful in the situation he's in Minnesota. I don't think the Steelers offense fits his skill set at all.
No, if we're going to be honest, I think I could be successful in Minnesota. And there were some guys that were pretty close to my talent level there last season that didn't play too terrible.
Let's go over to Tyler, who says, do you really think it's worth giving up a pick in general for a short-term rental? With our O-line injuries, isn't it realistic that we're now in a rebuilding year?
No, the Steelers are not in a rebuilding year. They're not even close to a rebuilding year. They have a defense to win a Super Bowl, and they paid them like they're going to win a Super Bowl. They have an offensive line that, yes, they lost 2 starters right now, currently. But when Isaac Seumalo comes back, and if Broderick Jones can pick things up, you essentially are just working with 1 lost starter on that offensive line. Not ideal, not perfect. Justin Fields scored 24 points with them last week. So there's a possibility things hold on. You're still 3-1 and lead the AFC North. I mean, there are a lot of injuries, but every team gets hit with injuries. It's about overcoming them. This is not a rebuilding year. And if you said that to somebody in Pittsburgh, they laugh at you and tell you, I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying that you would piss some people off in that locker room trying to convince them that they're not in this run, this hunt at 3-1.
Let's go over to Biggie, who wants to know, don't the Steelers have to give a higher draft pick for Justin Fields, given that he's playing more?
Yeah, they'll have to give up a 4th round pick instead of a 6th round pick. I mean, that everybody knew that was going to happen anyways, because the Pittsburgh Steelers always give up their 4th round pick. That's like a specialty of theirs, is to trade a 4th or a 5th round pick. So I feel like either way, they would have just been like, yeah, just take it, whatever. But it does become a 4th round pick. Yes.
Steven says, should the Cowboys offense be scared going into this week, knowing the defense is going to come in heated and hungry?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. I would look at it and say that this team is coming off of a bad loss, and it pissed a lot of people off, and they looked really bad, and they're going to have a lot of critics this week. A lot of people calling them phonies. A lot of people saying that this season's over. They'll come in here red hot, and they play well on primetime. They always play better on primetime. TJ Watt's close to history. Joey Porter Jr.'s got to come back, and Minka Fitzpatrick is probably still having nightmares about that ref throwing that flag. So I would say, yeah, the Cowboys should be pretty nervous about coming to Acrisure Stadium on Sunday night.
Unless I'm missing something, they also haven't forced a turnover in the last 2 weeks. So they might be hungry for that as well. Let's go over to Carl Spackler, who says, honestly, do we just have a poor mindset with quarterbacks? We've truthfully only had 2 well above average quarterbacks in the history of the Steelers organization. That's it.
I might be an outcast here, but I think Cordell Stewart would have been good if the city of Pittsburgh didn't run him out of Pittsburgh. So I agree with you, but I don't think it's a poor mindset. I think it's more so you got lucky twice with 2 Hall of Famers, 2 of the best in the league at the time, 2 Super Bowl winners. Now you're just trying to find that 3rd. You know, it can't always be over. And there are a lot of teams with a lot of great quarterbacks that continue to build on those quarterbacks and find those quarterbacks. I think the Steelers are hunting for the next one, but the expectation should never be you're going to get another Big Ben, because most teams never find the next Big Ben. They just find something good enough. And that's what the Steelers are looking for right now, something good enough.
Let's go to GL, who says, I heard that Micah Parsons and Lawrence will both be out. Is that true?
Yeah. Lawrence is actually on IR as of today. Micah Parsons is set to miss at least 2 weeks, could be more. So they will not be there. That's a massive boost for the Steelers. You want to talk about who they could lose, who the Cowboys could lose to help the Steelers. Those two are hands down the biggest names that you could have mentioned. And that's, especially with this offensive line, that is as big as it gets.
Macaroni Salad says, question, what is Roman not doing to not get a hat on Sundays?
He's just not there yet physically or mentally. Like, that's all it is he didn't go through training camp. He didn't play in the preseason. You are asking a guy with no NFL experience to get on the field and make plays and play a key special teams role and do all these things that you worked all summer and all early season to develop. Like, you built your team for the season. Like, it's here. Your team is assembled. Roman's got to break his way into that, which is a little bit more difficult than just saying you should go out there and fill these roles. You got to be able to play special teams and be reliable, and you got to be able to replace somebody who's out there. And the Steelers right now don't have anybody worth replacing in the eyes of the Steelers, not in the eyes of me or you or anybody else. In the eyes of the Steelers, they don't have anybody worth replacing right now. That's the trouble here. Do I agree with it? No. But that's their mindset to the situation.
Let's go over to Kuz Alexander, who says, I watched the Tomlin presser, and when asked if Justin answered any questions for him, he said yes. So my question is, do they play less conservative against the Cowboys now that he said that?
I don't know. I want to say yes, but it should have been yes last week. It should have been yes the week after that. Like, I just don't know. It's so hard to tell. It's so hard to tell simply because the way I look at it right now, Arthur Smith's worst game by 1.5 miles was Indianapolis, but he hasn't been perfect to this point by no means. I mean, the second half of Denver was atrocious, and that was on him. And you just wonder if this is a cycle, if you're going to get good and bad and good and bad, and who knows what they're going to do on a week-to-week basis. I look at this and say, I hope so. I hope that Justin Fields gets to be Justin Fields and gets to be that guy, and you could take the ball out of Najee Harris's hands when he's running for a yard a carry and give it to Justin. But I just don't know, because I don't have confidence in what their plan is actually.
Let's go over to Carl, who wants to know recommendations on where to stay for the draft in 2026, trying to finalize it before the end of the year.
That's awesome, dude. Congratulations. I hope you have a blast out here. If you want to stay on the North Shore, there's a Holiday Inn that's right there. That's pretty good. Stay anywhere downtown. Downtown's cool, and there's a boatload of stuff to do. If you're trying to stay outside the city, I mean, sleepers, get an Airbnb in Shadyside. Get an Airbnb in like Upper Lawrenceville. You'll have plenty of stuff to do up there, and it'll be a good time. And it's a short drive to the city, and it's a short drive to the North Shore. Don't stay further into the North Shore. It's not worth it. And I think that would be my recommendation is go to Shadyside, go to Lawrenceville. You'll get better prices, and there'll be a lot of stuff to do that's not just the draft.
Let's go to Leandrew, who says, speaking of Pittsburgh, do you guys ever go to Uncle Sam's Subs?
Dude, love Uncle Sam's Subs. Love Uncle Sam's Subs. I was so sad. We went to Point Park downtown, and I was so sad when Uncle Sam's Subs closed. It was just a tragic day. But there's one in Squirrel Hill. Hit it up as often as I possibly can, actually. Uncle Sam's is the shit.
We were truly blessed in college because we had Uncle Sam's Subs and Pepe's a block apart from each other and 2 blocks away from our campus. And unfortunately, both of them are closed now.
I know. Sad times. Sad. And to be honest, people will be like, well, there's a Target downtown. I could care less. I shopped at Burlington and CVS, and it made my life very easy. And I got great sandwiches, and I'll take the sandwiches any day.
Let's go over to Vibin with the Dogs, who says, doesn't Davante Adams cost a lot of money? Omar Khan would have to work some magic. And if so, what does that mean for the future at wide receiver and at quarterback?
Can you Can you look up the Steelers salary cap currently? I want to say it's still somewhere around $13 million. And then I'll look up Davante Adams' salary is not crazy either. And I mean, like, not crazy in terms of wide receiver money. The way I look at it right now is you're taking on a $25.3 million cap hit. That has gone down since it's week 5 of the NFL season. So you're looking at a little bit less than that. I don't know what the Steelers have in salary cap space, but I would imagine it's around 13 million.
As of right now, according to Over the Cap, the Steelers have $10.5 million in salary cap space.
Okay, so you got to come up with 15 million bucks. Actually, you probably have to come up with less than that. Probably somewhere around 13, maybe $12 million. I think that's very doable. You could find some restructures somewhere. And if not, I mean, you could release somebody somewhere to make something happen. I think it's doable. You'd have to work some magic, but not a number you couldn't work with.
Let's go over to Terry Jones, who says Smith needs a Le'Veon Bell type back. What do you think?
Yeah, that's exactly what he needs, if we're going to be honest. Cordero Patterson showed that. You have patience with zone runs, you get good results. Najee doesn't have patience, and he doesn't have the speed. Like, Najee's not. It's not against Najee. It's just not. It's not his style of running. It's not what he's supposed to do. So, if you ran what he was supposed to do, I bet you have more success. But I bet you the Steelers as a whole wouldn't. So, I put it on a little bit of both. Cordero Patterson showed that if you have a patient back with some speed and some burst, you can get things done. I'd put Cordero out there almost every single time over Najee right now, and same with Jaylen Warren.
Redmond Reed says, sorry if somebody already asked this, but what is the plan with the James Daniels injury? Will Anderson start at right guard?
I would guess Mason McCormick starts at right guard and Isaac Seumalo comes back. That's just the vibe that I have right now. I haven't been able to confirm anything with Isaac and their sense there and who's going to start where. I don't think that the Steelers are ready to have that plan in place, and they just don't know when Isaac's going to officially be back. They're hoping it's this week. I would guess Mason goes to right guard. Isaac starts at left.
X Concepts has another question about the guard position. Says, are there any remaining starting quality veteran guards available on the free agent market that could be an upgrade over McCormick or Spencer Anderson?
I mean, there's this guy named Mason Cole who's floating around out there just ready for a team. No, I don't think so. I really truthfully don't think so. There's not many great options out there. You'd have to look at it and really dig and take a shot on somebody who doesn't know your offense and hope that he could come in here and just make some noise. Matt Filer, potentially, but again, you have to learn your offense. They added Max Sharping today off of the Washington Commanders practice squad, former fourth round pick, potentially somewhere in that neighborhood. And he's a guy that's got some starting experience. Maybe he helps, but McCormick's going to be the guy, and they'll test Spencer Anderson out there before they do anything drastic.
Let's finish it off with Melissa Nunez, who says, what do we do at running back if Jaylen Warren and Cordero Patterson don't come back this week? Do you keep trying Aaron Shamplin?
Yeah, and Jonathan Ward. They signed LaMichael P. Ryan to the practice squad today while we were on this podcast, actually. So I would guess Jonathan Ward is a guy that's coming up. Cordero is going to be shut down for at least a week, probably a couple weeks. I would imagine that's an ankle sprain. And Jaylen is not. He's not there yet. I don't even think he's coming back to practice this week. Maybe a little bit, but not a lot. I would imagine they hold him off until he's like ready to go. This doesn't have to be a slow buildup. It's going to be Jonathan Ward. It's going to be Aaron Shamplin, and it's going to be Najee Harris. And I don't feel great about that, but the Steelers have had success in the past with names like Benny Snell, Jalen Samuels. I mean, I still remember when Karen White showed up off the Chicago Bears practice squad and ran for like 80 yards. So it's happened before. It could happen again. I think Shamplin has shown some good things. Jonathan Ward very, very much so impressed me during training camp. I think he's a name to watch. So I feel okay about what they have. Not the best, but I feel okay about it.
That's a wrap for today then.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are heading out of here. Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. Thank you guys so much for your Overreaction Tuesday submissions as well. We will make sure to do that every Tuesday, and you guys can toss them in there, so we'll make sure we grab those. With that said, enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.